Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about networking beyond bias. What does that mean? And, there's so much conversation right now about diversity and inclusion. And our guest here is an expert in this area of really going beyond the unconscious biases that we have and creating networks that are truly valuable. So I'm really excited to have with us here today, Amy Waninger. Amy is a speaker, an author, and a coach. Her book actually is called Network Beyond Bias, and she so generously sent me a copy, and it is now packed somewhere. So she's got a copy of it there. So for those of you that are watching, that's what the book looks like. And thank you, Amy. And we're excited to have you here on the Leaders of Transformation today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
It's a pleasure. And a shout out to Julie Kratz, because she actually found me through Julie. Julie's been on the show. Julie's amazing. She wrote a book called One, talking about male allies in the workplace, and she's a really fantastic person. If you haven't heard that interview, go back. You can find on the leadersoftransformation.com, type in Julie, and hers will come up. So, but let me tell you a little bit more about Amy. Amy is the founder and CEO of Lead at Any Level LLC, which helps busy professionals develop skills in leadership, diversity, and inclusion, and career management. As I said, she's the author of the book Network Beyond Bias, Making Diversity a Competitive Advantage for Your Career. And she holds 2 degrees from Indiana University. And she is a certified change practitioner. And she's also got credentials in the insurance industry. And I love this in her bio. She's also got a World's Best Mom coffee mug. So her kids think that she is the best. And
just one of
that's
them.
probably the most, the one that you pride the most.
It is. Yeah. Just one of my kids thinks I'm the best. I have a teenager and a toddler. And then I have one in the middle. So I can't do anything right for 2 of them, but the one in the middle likes me pretty much.
Well, you know what? It's interesting. My brother has 4 kids, 4 girls, all within 5 years of each other. And when you get into your 20s, mid-20s, it's about mid-20, that all of a sudden you become very intelligent. So they're all discovering that their parents actually do know something, which is neat. And I think we all go through that phase of we know everything. And then we realize, oh, actually, I think my parents got really smart all of a sudden. But anyway, I digress. So for our listeners and our viewers, we're excited that you're here as well. We're going to have some fun here. I know Amy likes to have some fun. I've seen some of her material. She likes to, have a good time. So this is not just going to be a serious conversation. We're going to enjoy it and make sure that it's very valuable for you, and that you can apply it in your businesses and in your lives and your careers. And so, because the whole reason why we do this podcast is to inspire you, is to equip you and educate you to be the difference maker, the world changer that you're capable of being, the leader of transformation. And so we encourage you afterwards, love to hear your stories. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, all the different platforms as leadersoftransformation.com. Actually, Twitter, it's Leaders Podcast. And of course, you can go to leadersoftransformation.com, our website, and find us through that. We'd love to hear your stories and how you're also making a difference in the world. So we encourage you to do that. So Amy, let's dive in. You wrote this book, Network Beyond Bias. And what was the impetus to writing this?
Thank you for asking. So I've been a champion of diversity and inclusion for as long as I can remember. And it was only just a few years ago that I found out that you could make it your job. And because I met someone who made it their job, and I was so excited. I have 20 years in information technology and management, and but none of it in the diversity and inclusion space, like paid work in that space up until very recently. And when I found out that you could do this, like this thing that I'm passionate about, that I love, I was like, well, how do I do that? And I started reading everything I could, and I felt like there was something missing. There was a lot out there for people who set corporate policy or set public policy, or write employee handbooks. There's a lot for senior leaders in organizations, but I was just me, right? I was just a frontline manager, just a middle manager, just a person in the world wanting to do the right thing. And it was really hard to find anything that would say, like, here's how to get started in this personally. Here's how to make this real for you, and some steps you can take to be sure that you're being more inclusive in your career specifically. And So in the absence of any literature on that topic, I kind of sat down to think about, well, if I were going to solve this problem, how would I solve it? And I came up with a network assessment tool that's in the back of the book that talks about 5 critical connections for your career. And I call that Network Like a Champ. And then there's a model that explores what perspectives does your network ignore. And that really helps you get not just the people that are top of mind for you, but how different are they from you really? And the first time I took my own assessment, Nicole, I was horrified because everybody looked just like me. And I thought, well, this is no good. I say I'm a diversity champion, but everybody in my network is white. Most of them are women. A lot of them are in my same industry. And I just wasn't, I wasn't connected beyond people who look just like me. And I thought, well, that's really a problem. That's, I'm missing a lot of opportunity. So I put that all together and put a lot of personal stories about my journey, into this mindset shift into the book. And now it's out there for everyone to judge me accordingly.
I love that. Everybody to judge you accordingly. And you know what? People do judge. They make their assessments regardless. So you might as well just be you and put out there what you want, what you want to put out there, what you're passionate about. But the thing is, I think your book is so timely. We're now at the release of this, we're now in 2019, and there is so much conversation about, so much conversation about diversity. But then the average, if we look at our networks, there's most of the people do look like us. I'm very cognizant of that on my podcast. If I see a whole bunch of white people, for example, and I'm like, okay, where am I not connecting? And it's not even, it's culture, it's even religion, it's diversity takes a lot of different shapes and sizes. I just recently had a guest on, Rich Donovan, who has cerebral palsy, and he has a company that is called Return on Disability. And so he's actually going into companies and saying, you are missing a huge percentage of the marketplace here. And so, working with them, major companies, on how they can actually capitalize and bring value to that segment of the market, which is a huge segment. So, diversity takes a lot of different looks. But when you talk about networking and you said the 5 different networks, maybe we can go into those 5 different networks that, especially like if somebody's looking to build their career, expand, get a promotion, or maybe they got packaged out and they're looking for that next career. Oftentimes our networks are so small. I get people less and less now, but still, it's still somewhat of an issue is, oh shoot, now I've got to go build my network. Now I've got to go nurture those relationships. Now I've got to build my LinkedIn profile, when they could have been doing that a long time ago. And knowing that at some point there are going to be changes and is going to be a need. I had a guy once years ago, he said, we were at a networking event and he got a card from this guy who was in insurance. And he's like, what do I care about a guy having insurance? I said, you don't know 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, 6 months, from now, what's going to happen. You don't know. That's a great guy. Just keep the card. Like, it doesn't hurt you to have another connection,
Right.
and certainly nurture it. And you just never know the connection. Maybe, somebody asks you for a referral to an insurance broker or whatever. Or, you come across a path again, but it's so narrow-minded to think like, unless they can do something for me right now, then what's the point? And there's so much more to that. So can you talk about those 5 networks?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, Nicole, I think a lot of us, it's like having a line of credit, right? So you need to establish a line of credit when you don't need the money, because when you need the money, nobody wants to give you any money, right?
That is a great analogy. Oh my goodness.
The same thing with a network. You need to establish a good network before you have the smell of desperation on you that you're looking for a job, or that you need an angel investor or something like that. You need to have paid it forward and built up this line of credit with your network long before you ever call in any favors. And so what I try to do when I meet new people, instead of even for a minute thinking, what can they do for me? I try to find some way I can help them. It might be recommending a book to them, or connecting them with somebody else in my network, or sending them an article that I read that was related to a topic that we discussed. It could be something as simple as retweeting something that's important to them, part of their message, or part of their brand, to help share that with my network. So just something small like that can make a huge difference in how we show up and how other people receive us. So I'll stop on that line, and go back to the 5 critical connections. So network like a champ is about the people that you choose in your network. There are 2 maxims that I draw on for this. One is the book, Your Network is Your Net Worth, is a great axiom. I love that. It's so true. And just like we would diversify our stock portfolio, we have to diversify our network. You wouldn't invest only in the company where you work, and you should invest your network there either. The other kind of mantra that ties into this is that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if you really want to grow and you want to play bigger, right? You need to be intentional about who you're connecting with. And so network like a champ it kind of explains these 5 kind of volunteer networks that you join. So C stands for customer or constituent. And this is really about getting outside of your office occasionally and going and talking to the people who are or could be buying your products and services, patronizing your company, voting for your cause, whatever business you're in. This is your target audience. And you need to be as close to these folks as possible, so when things are changing in their world, how you and your organization need to adapt to meet new needs. A lot of people will talk about getting closer to the customer in their organizations, but then they don't actually go and do it. And even if you're, in the back of the house in IT, like I was for so many years, it's still good to go do a ride along with a salesperson from your organization. Go to a user conference and sit down and talk to people about how are they using your company's software, or, a buyer's conference or a trade show. What is it that you're looking for when you're shopping for our kind of product or service? What are the make or break features for you? The more you understand, the more you can advocate for your customer, and the more leadership you're going to demonstrate within your organization. So that's C.
Yeah, and that one, that's the one I think that people are probably the most familiar with, because they're like, oh, I know I need to connect with my customers or constituents. They may not do it to the extent, like you said, going out to those user groups and so forth, but they know that they're aware of. And of course, we're talking about diversity, and having even in that, it's interesting. Rich Donovan, who I interviewed, he was talking about most people look at your core customer. He said you need to ask the customers on the fringe as well. What is important to you? Because that's where innovation can actually happen. So to your point, yeah, very, very important. So yeah, what about the other 4? I'll let you keep going.
So H is hire or help. We hear a lot about sponsorship and how we need, women are over mentored and under sponsored, and people of color are over mentored and under sponsored in the workplace. But there's not a lot out there that says, hey, Nicole, who are you sponsoring right now? Right? We're all waiting until we've made it, right? We're not going to all be Oprah rich someday. We can't just, show up and everybody gets a job. So it's important right now, wherever we are, to hire or help people get jobs. If you're not a hiring manager, can you connect someone to a hiring manager? Can you make a referral for an open position in your company? Do you have a good relationship with a recruiter and you can share that contact information with someone who's looking for a job? There are millions of us in the freelance economy, right, in the gig economy. Can you promote somebody on Fiverr and help them land their next gig? Or, connect, like we all know people who are looking for something, and we know somebody else that offers that thing. Just connecting those people can make a huge difference. It creates economic opportunity for someone else, and not necessarily for us, but the goodwill that creates, especially if you do it frequently, is phenomenal. And, this is all about putting credits in that bank, right? So when you need somebody later, they're happy to pick up the phone when you call.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I used to get when I was in Toronto, I knew a lot of people in Toronto, and so I would meet people that were, looking for clients and looking to hire people. And I met a lot of people that were executives in transition. I was working with this organization, and they were helping executives in transition get jobs. And so, as I'm listening to what people are looking for on both sides, I was easily able to make these connections. And so I had people say to me, like, well, how are you doing this? Like, and why are you doing this? Like, why are you sending me all these referrals? Like, I had a guy who's a good friend of mine, became a good friend of mine, and he was into recruiting for a financial services company. And here I'm meeting people that are coming with financial backgrounds out of the corporate world that are looking for new positions. And I'd say, have you ever considered, becoming a financial advisor or independent financial advisor or whatever? Anyway, so I'm sending him all these leads, and he's like, how do you know that? Right? It's like, well, because I asked, because when we first got to know each other, I was asking you who you work with. And I just kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And here I am. I happen to be sitting in front of somebody who is exactly what you described. Why wouldn't I make that connection? And when we listen, we get an opportunity that, well, not doing it for that reason, but inadvertently what happened is that there was huge reciprocity that came out of that, because he was like, I want to do something for you. I feel like I should be paying you. I said, no, don't worry about it. I just do it because I enjoy it and I can. Right. But as a result of that, I did end up getting a lot of referrals back, just because I had created that goodwill, because I wanted to, not because of what I was looking to get back for. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to store that favor for later. I didn't do it for that reason. And people knew that. And so, yeah, I had a lot of my business from Toronto that came from referrals as a result of that.
It's awesome. And you make better connections when you're not looking for a referral fee, because you're not playing a numbers game, right?
Yes.
You're really looking for somebody who's a good match for this
Yes.
individual, or, that they're a good match for each other. And, if you do this right, it works out really well for both parties. And, in one action, you've created goodwill two places.
Yes, exactly.
And so it really has a multiplier effect.
Yeah. And I feel good, right? I like doing it. It's like, wow, I just got to connect these people. I do that, in my Facebook group all the time, right? Connecting people. And it's like, oh, wow, I love doing that. It's fun.
Absolutely.
So
It
CH, what's A?
A is for an associate. So this is somebody who is at your same level, maybe at your company or maybe not, but somebody that, will kind of pace set with you. Or that, when you're having one of those days at work that, you like really, like 2:00 rolls around and you need a cup of coffee, or 5:00 rolls around and you need something a little stronger. Like, this is the person that you call and you say, hey, I just got to bounce some ideas off of you, or, I need to know I'm not crazy, or I need you to tell me if I'm way out of line with my thinking. So it's just somebody that you've built a lot of trust with, or, a network of people that you've built a lot of trust with, that, where there's no power play.
Yeah, that's good. Good.
And then, and I think we all need that, right? We need a tribe. We need people that, just that we know we have each other's back.
Yeah.
And then M, I'll do M and P together. So M is for mentor and P is for protege. And I tell people you need both, because a mentor is going to show you the way forward, but a protege is going to help you understand how far you've already come. So many of us, especially women and people of color, suffer from imposter syndrome. And that's where we think that the more expertise we have, the less we value our own expertise, basically.
Right.
Because we think, well, now that we know it, it's not that big a deal to know it. Or now that we've achieved, a certification or a certain level in a company, it's not that big a deal anymore because we made it. So it must not be that hard. And we forget that there was a time 5 minutes ago when that was still aspirational for us, and that there are, dozens and dozens of people behind us, 5 minutes, 5 years or more behind us, looking at us thinking, wow, I want to be like that someday. And connecting with those people and understanding, here's what I learned along the way, is not just good for the people that we're mentoring, it's also good for us, and it's good for building confidence. It's good for, really understanding kind of what our unique value proposition is in our networks and in our work. And, it's hard to see what your strengths are until you're around someone who doesn't share those same strengths or doesn't have those strengths yet or those skills yet. And then you realize, oh, I do have something valuable to offer in this space. And a mentor, can do the same thing for you in a different direction, right? Can help you pick out those things that are good that you may not recognize in yourself. They can help you find ways forward that you may not know about. A lot of people, I talk sometimes at colleges, and college students will say, I don't even have a job yet. How can I mentor? And what I tell them is, well, since you're sitting here in this college classroom and we're having this conversation, I'm going to assume that you know, one, how to graduate from high school, and two, how to keep yourself out of jail. And so if you can think about the entirety of people who have not yet graduated from high school, who are maybe struggling with knowing that that's even a possibility for them, or, they're struggling with, how to get there or what to do after they graduate because they've never seen anything beyond that. That's a huge population of young people that can use your guidance and expertise. And the same thing with folks who have been incarcerated. you know they've had challenges assimilating into the world. They've had challenges with their socialization, or maybe they need job skills, or they just fell on hard times and had a run of bad luck. But you figured out how to navigate this world without falling into those same circumstances. We have the highest per capita prison population in the world, in the United States. Go find someone to mentor in that setting. And then when they come out, they're going to make the world a better place, because you guarantee those folks are going to be the ones to pay it forward, because they know how bad it can get, right?
Oh, yeah. I think of the high school students with peer pressure issues, issues with dating and feeling comfortable, the socialization of, just maybe feeling awkward, or, this transition, huge transition in life, and how they can support them through that. Reminds me also of a story of, I heard it was Joel Osteen who told the story about this guy who had come from a low-income family, not a lot of, like the vocabulary was more limited, but he had aspirations of, and he was actually African-American, and he had aspirations of being this big-time journalist. And he was went to university or college, and was rooming with somebody who came from a very affluent family. And this young person heard him and said, and they shared what their aspirations were. And he said, well, if you're going to be a journalist, and a very famous journalist, then you got to expand your vocabulary. And so every day he would take one word and teach him one new word every day. And they roomed together for quite a number, for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, he helped his roommate to expand his vocabulary so substantially. And that guy I don't know the name, he didn't share it. He actually did go on to be a very famous journalist. So there's a good example of somebody that you don't have to have the graduate, degree or master's or PhD or whatever, or even a successful career yet. You can be at that point and you've got something that you can share with somebody else and be able to support them. So great great point there. And so as we're talking about diversity, and I look at those networks, and we could have, like you said, even looking at your network at one point, you looked at it and everybody kind of looked like you. You can have all 5 of those networks and have it still be limited in its perspective because of who's in those networks. So let's talk about unconscious bias. What is it, and how do we overcome it and build networks that are truly diverse and have the range of perspective that we need in order to truly, thrive and be our best?
Sure. So, the thing about unconscious bias, and I think a lot of diversity conversations start there for good reason. Number one, we all have biases, and we have very conscious biases at that, right? I know when I go to get ice cream, I want, like, I don't want anything with nuts in it, and like, I've got criteria, right? And I know, and those are conscious
You
biases.
and me both.
I've got like all these, like super stupid criteria about, like flavors of ice cream or what I'm going to get on the menu if I go somewhere new or whatever. And so, but those are choices I know that I'm making. Where we get into trouble, I think, is that we make choices all the time just because we default to patterns of behavior that we don't readily recognize. And when we keep defaulting and we keep going down the same path over and over again, we stop realizing that maybe there are other paths, or that we are making a choice. And so, this starts for us very, very early. When, before we're even born, our communities are starting to socialize us based on whether we're boys or girls, right? People show up to the baby shower with pink stuff or blue stuff. Or, if they have those frustrating parents that will not tell you, then, people are confused and they show up with green, or like, I don't know what the right
Yellow
is, right? Yellow and green.
a lot of yellow.
A lot of yellow. So, like, this starts before we're even out. Like, there's this expectation of how we're going to show up. And then, once we get here, our socialization is intense, right? Like, the way we're talked to as infants is different, based on who we are, how we look. And then we start to form an identity based on the way the world's treating us. Then we start to make judgments about other people based on the identities we've created. Then we start to choose our experiences to be in line with the identities and the values that we've, taken on. And we start to exclude people who, in our judgment, are different from us in some significant way. And it may be something as small as, the kind of food that we eat, or whether we like sports versus art, silly stuff like that, that's really not make or break differences in whether or not we can get along with another human being. But we tend to do this, and so we start creating this world that's smaller and smaller and smaller for ourselves. Well, after a point, we no longer get the inputs that are different. We no longer see things, right? These are the bubbles that we create for ourselves. And anything that's different just doesn't even come our way because we've shut it off. So we're still making a choice. We're just not making a conscious choice. What we need to do, though, is be aware that we're doing that and start seeking out new experiences, seeking out people that don't share the same identities or values that we share, people that have differences of opinion, people whose experiences are wildly different from our own. And maybe we've ended up in the same place, but we didn't get there the same way. And there's a lot of value in sharing those stories and understanding, those backstories from people so that we can see how connected we truly are. Now, Once you start doing that and you recognize, oh, there are entire swaths of humanity that I am ignoring on a day-to-day basis that just never even hit my radar, then you can start to do the work of thinking about, where might I find people to learn more about their perspective? How might I need to show up in that space to be welcomed? Where would, if I wanted to be an ally for a group, going back to, the gentleman that was speaking on disability, if I wanted to show up in a way that was, that was vulnerable and authentic in a community of people who are dealing with disabilities, what kind of preparation do I need to do with myself before I go into that environment? How do I need to listen so that I'm actually, I'm bridging my world to theirs in a way that's beneficial to them, and not, patronizing or condescending, right? So
it's like, all these Orientals. Really? You're actually going to go in and say, I want to get to know, I've heard somebody once, I think it was in a movie or something like that. Yeah, I want to learn all about you Orientals. And it's like, I'm American. Thank you. But so, that's offensive.
I'm cringing so bad.
Yeah. What's that?
I said, there's just like every part of me is cringing hearing that. It's terrible.
And it's like, really? Do you hear that coming out? Now, we gotta be careful. We're not judging because people don't know. Right. And right. I get that. And they were actually, I posted this thing once with, a little boy and a little girl, and different ethnic backgrounds, and it was something like, children don't know prejudice, right? Or prejudice is learned. I mean, it's learned behavior, and we have the opportunity and the responsibility to, as part of a global society, to go beyond. I think having kids, like even between high school and college, to go and take that year abroad and learning about different cultures, or go on missions trips, or see different cultures, I think that's super valuable, because you get this wider perspective, and you understand how to communicate. Not only being aware, it's like I teach personalities, and I say, it's not that, I need to let people know we're different. We all know we're different. The question is how we're different. That's the key, to
Right.
understand that. And so to understand how to communicate with people of different cultures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about showing up and talking to people. I mean, you need to do some work ahead of time.
Yeah.
Read books, read blogs, read, Twitter feeds from people who are different from you. Not so you can step in and correct them,
Yeah.
but so you can really listen and learn and understand, what are the values and experiences and identities that are driving, um, that are driving their responses to situations, or that are, contributing to a particular worldview,
Yeah.
or maybe, that are offering them some protection in the world, right? Because we all show up just wanting to protect ourselves and the people that are close to us.
Yeah.
And so, if we spend a lot of time first listening, um, then I think we can show up in ways that we're not we're not stopping the conversation so that everybody can catch us up.
Yes.
We're just showing up and absorbing and finding small ways to plug in, to provide access to things that maybe we have that others don't, or to maybe gain access for others,
Yes.
in that environment.
Yeah. Because
So
we
I've
could,
asked,
yeah,
yeah,
we could quickly shut, like you were saying about, we could quickly shut ourselves out, wanting to even be generous, genuinely curious, but shut ourselves out of a whole community because of the way that we're actually showing up. And that's where it comes back to the responsibility of us really taking the responsibility of educating ourselves. I believe that we're all global citizens. And so in this day and age, especially with the internet and social media, and you can learn so much. Just Google it,
absolutely.
and you can learn so much from that, rather than putting the onus and the responsibility on somebody else to educate you on
Right.
something that you could already. And then you can have a further conversation. What I'm hearing you say is, by the time you do meet and connect with people of different cultures, race, background, whatever, uh, even religious preferences, whatever, is to have that education, that you can have now a second level conversation, or next step conversation, as opposed to base level, understanding that you got to start the starting point, first gear. You can
Right.
maybe start at third or fourth gear, and they're going to appreciate it because you've actually taken interest in getting to know them through that. So we've talked a lot about, the concepts and so forth. What are some interesting stories, or, I shared, a couple, like the one about the movie, and so forth. And it's like, oh Lord, that's the what not to do. And I
Right.
guess because I come from Toronto is a very multicultural city. So you have people from all different backgrounds there. And so I don't know, maybe I just look at the world differently as a result of that. Versus some places down here in the U.S. that there is huge racial divides, which I was actually quite astonished by. I know certain areas of the country there are, but I wasn't expecting it necessarily quite so much in LA.
Mhm.
In what I discovered when I moved there. But yeah, tell us some, maybe share some stories and some practical tips. So what can our listeners do that can help them to, like, what's the next step for them? Where would they begin in
Sure.
this journey?
So I think the first step is listening and learning. And, we've already kind of talked about that. I think the second step is show up, and not showing up to take over, but just showing up to observe,
That's
showing
good.
up
Yeah.
to be present and to be seen and not heard. If you're walking into, as a person of relative privilege, walking into an environment of people with lesser privilege, you're not there to be the expert. You're there to listen and support and do what's asked of you. And I think that's really hard. I think it's especially hard for white women to do in communities of color. I think we go in and we think that we have to take charge, and that's like the very last thing that's wanted from us in that situation. But just like like I've invited men to go to women's conferences, not because I want them to come in and explain to the women how to do things right in business, because that's not their place in that environment.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Their place is to sit and listen and absorb and learn and tease out different perspectives and understand that even within a community of women, there are a lot of differences of opinion. People have different goals and objectives. We have different ideas about the way things should be done for us and with us and among us. And, and I think every community has that, right? Every community has differences of opinion about what is the best path forward for that community, how to engage allies to that community. And, I see it as our job, if we show up as the other, right, and especially as the more privileged other, that we show up in a way that we're looking for those nuances and trying to understand them. That if someone asks for our help, we're prepared to say, yes, how can I help you? What can I do? Here are the skills, here's the access, here are the things that I offer, that I have available to me. Does any of that help? If not, is there something else I can do? And at the same time, many of us are showing up in places where we are the less privileged other, right? Where we are women in a male-dominated field, where we are people of color in a white, corporate environment. People who have disabilities in very able-bodied spaces. And I think, in those cases, it's incumbent upon us when we have less privilege to look for allies, as exhausting as it is to be patient with those allies because they don't know what they don't know. And, to share enough about ourselves that even though we're maybe risking giving up a little bit of power, and that's really hard to do when we already feel like we're out of power, right? But maybe finding ways to speak up a little bit more and understand that there are trends and that those trends are in part because of our collective unwillingness to change those trends. So an example I give is I have a former colleague who was absolutely fearless about changing jobs. I mean, just fearless. If he understood what the words on the job description meant, for the most part, he assumed he was qualified and he would apply. And, the research shows us that women want like every single checkbox filled before we apply for the job. And when I read that statistic that men will apply when they have like 40% or 60% of the qualifications, and women wait until they've like 80 to 100%, I was ready to look for a new job, and I started thinking about where was I going to apply. And when I saw the job descriptions pop up, I was like, oh gosh, I can't do that. I don't meet all of those criteria. And then I thought, well, okay, so I'm being, like, to use a phrase I don't like, but I'm being a typical woman, right? I'm waiting until I can fill all those boxes, and it's a slam dunk to apply for that job. And if I want to change this statistic and I want to close the gender pay gap and I want to close the achievement gap for women, I have to do my part too. And I'm going to apply for this job. And when the hiring manager asks me if I've done all these things, I'm going to say, no, I haven't done all of those things, but I know I can, and here's why. And I'm going to go at it with the same kind of confidence I would have if I were the guy on my team next to me who I know would do this, right? So I kind of draw inspiration from, from people who are maybe doing things in ways that work. And, if I know that I'm part of a larger trend, can I buck that trend? Probably. Because then I'm not just doing it for me, right? I'm doing it for all women. So I feel like I've got a little bit more a little bit stronger spine about it when it's not just about me.
Yeah. And what I also heard in that was, I love what you talked about. It's both ways. Sometimes we want to blame the other side and saying, you don't understand me, you're not giving me opportunities, whatever. But at the same time, it's us taking responsibility to seek to understand, to seek to learn, to create those opportunities, to walk through those doors. That's actually one of the things about the women's movement that, I when it's first started coming out, it was like, let's look at both sides here, right? So I know that I'm in the driver's seat in my own life too. So I know that when I get into situations, I have a choice about what I'm going to do in those situations. So we need to look at both of that side, because otherwise, if I don't, and I only look at blaming them, then I put myself in a position of victim. And that is not, now I use the analogy of I'm in the passenger seat, not the driver's seat in my life. And if I'm in the passenger seat, somebody else is always going to be controlling what my life looks like and where we go. And so that's not really where, I want to live. And that's not really where I am living, because the truth is I do get to choose a lot of things. And yes, there are circumstances, but that's where we bust through paradigms and, we figure out ways around that. So I love that you're talking about both sides, and also having the humility and setting aside the pride of, I don't want to ask this, I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to ask for that mentorship. I don't want to, look like I don't know what I'm doing, and even asking for that job and then having somebody say no. And we get afraid of that resistance because of pride and so forth. So setting that aside and really just being open. And that's where we learn and we grow, is what I'm, indirectly, it's what I'm hearing you say, is for us to like really break down the barriers. The wall comes down on both sides. And when we do that, then we have true collaboration, as opposed to it all being one-sided. So, and curiosity. I always say choose curiosity over criticism, choose fascination over frustration. The only time we get frustrated with other people is because they're not doing what we think they should be doing. And quite honestly, who are we to say what they should or shouldn't be doing? So we have, so rather than being frustrated, we just be fascinated and be curious. I remember what Abraham Lincoln, there was a quote I read somewhere. He said about, I think it was one of his generals that he didn't like. And he said, I don't like that person. I need to get to know them better. Mm-hmm. And that is the very opposite of what we normally do, is I don't like that person, so I'm writing them off, rather than getting curious and learning more about them. So this has been a great conversation, Amy. Your book unpacks this much deeper. I encourage our listeners, we'll make sure the link is in the show notes, so they can go type in Amy in the search field. We have a couple of Amy's. I just recently interviewed a wonderful lady also named Amy, and actually way back another one, but you'll see Amy Waninger, the show notes for this episode will be there when you type in Amy. And but they can go to also, it's lead@anylevel.com, which is a great URL, by the way. Awesome that you were able to snag that. And so all the information is going to be there as well. You also consult, you speak as well. Maybe tell us our listeners a little bit more about what they can expect when they go to your website.
Sure. So I have articles up, from the blog. There's links to all the podcasts that all the podcast interviews I've done on the press page. You can book time with me if you just want to chat and learn more. There's an offer, and Nicole, I'll give you this link directly too for your show notes. But I have an offer out for a free ebook. It's 21 Insights for Inclusive Networking, and it's some little snippets from the book.
Yeah.
That kind of help get your head around what this is that we're talking about. There's a lot of information out there. I try to put a different spin on these lofty leadership, these lofty leadership principles. I try to break them down and make them real for real people, so that we can put them into action and be better leaders every single day wherever we are.
I love it. Yeah, everybody's a leader. Like I love that, lead at any level. Everybody is a leader. We get to lead our lives in leading ourselves, but also leading others. And in and around us. I remember once I had a mentor and I said, I want to be I want to be an example. And he said, you already are an example. The question is, what kind of example are you? And I was like, good
Yeah,
point. So
absolutely.
yeah, with that, thank you so very much. And for our listeners and our viewers, I encourage you to go to lead@anylevel.com. We'll also make sure, as I said, that link and the link to the free gift from Amy is going to be in the show notes for you. Leaders of transformation, take action. I encourage you to take action on something that Amy has shared here today, whether it's just checking in with yourself and saying, honestly, how curious am I about people that I don't know, cultures that I'm not aware of? How often do I go on Google and learn about different cultures? We live in a global society. Maybe even making it a practice of spending a few minutes and learning about a group of people, an affinity group that you don't know anything about. That'd be a great practice. Looking at your network and saying, okay, what of those 5 networks, where am I strong, but also where am I weak, and where do I need to build up? And don't wait. I love it. Don't wait. I'm going to forget it now, but in your beginning, that analogy that you made about I think it was a line of credit. It's like, don't wait to apply for a line of credit. Get it while you don't need it. And that's the thing, is build your network now, because you just never know. And besides the fact that you can give so much value to other people, it's not about you. It's not all about you.
Right.
It's about also how can you create value for other people, and you never know when that's going to come back. So I encourage you to do something with what you've learned today, because that's where transformation happens, when we take action. And I look forward to hearing those stories. You can find us on social media, on our website, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.